Yes, for me too, Poupon. So we got all of our costumes going. My costume sucks, clearly. Mike's costume is awesome, by the way.
What are you, John Strand?
I tried to dress as John Strand for the day.
You did a fantastic job. You got that. I should have glasses. They're brothers. It's amazing. So
You stand up, Brian, you and Shecky, and everyone's like, I don't know.
I was gonna dress as Kevin Johnson.
Were you just gonna get in the Chewbacca?
Is that a cat butt? What the hell, man?
Sorry, I'm censoring it with the Pepe.
What the? Sorry, children.
Is this cat butt? This is not okay. This is a family show, okay?
This is for me to poop on.
This is for
you get your pussy cat away. It does not poop on here.
No. That is for them to poop, not for me to poop on. That is a German thing.
All right.
Grey Poupon?
What?
Grey Poupon.
What did I do?
I just realized my pants have zippers on the back pockets. I didn't know that.
2 minutes.
That's for when rural people go to cities so they don't get pickpocketed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, wait,
did you go to Seattle? I'm like, yeah, it was fantastic. Wow, was it all on fire? No, we had really great brunch and it was a good time. So
there was a guy I didn't believe it until I had to interact with someone when we brought up Portland, and he was like, Portland burned to the ground. I'm like, what are you talking
Portland
about?
did burn to the ground. That is accurate. Don't come here. Please don't buy real estate if you do.
Oh,
and I want everybody to know that Western South Dakota, specifically the Black Hills, sucks. Please tell your friends.
Yes. Do not buy property there. There's nothing good.
Do not buy property here. No.
Sorry, John.
When I came home from Wild West, my wife's like, "So are we gonna buy property?" And I was like, "No, it sucks. It's horrible.
It's horrible there. It's god awful.
It's
just bad.
It's horrible."
My wife fell in love with
Western South Dakota is so bad that I hear that fake accounts are even moving away from there.
Joe, bring your mic down just a hair. I think it was Joe. So hard to tell with the masks. What's going on?
Yeah, I think that was Joe.
Yeah. You know what's weird? Joe's background interfering with his hat somehow makes his costume better. I don't know how that works, but it's pretty amazing.
Our moth person. Oh, let's see
10 seconds into the game and we're directly insulted as a German is okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, is audio better now?
Nope, much worse. Other way.
When did we insult Germans? I don't remember that.
I think we were doing Triumph, the insult dog, and then the comment was made in German. I don't think Triumph was German, actually.
No, he wasn't.
So speaking German is considered an insult?
No.
Poorly is. Yeah. It is. Yeah.
Triumph was making a joke that's only adult humor.
Yes. Yeah. Ouch.
All right.
Thanks,
do we have
brother.
our moth? Is our moth here? Come in, moth. Over. Raise antenna. No.
Man.
All right.
All right. Are we ready to get this rolling?
I think we're gonna roll a more differenter finger. So here we go. Let's do this.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Black Hills Information Security, talking about news. We're going to be talking about the Okta hack twice. We're going to be talking about the Boeing hack once. We're going to be talking about 1Password back to the Okta. We're going to talk about AI-generated child-exploited images, and that's going to be a downer when we get that, to be honest with you. It's going to be bad. We're going to talk about VPN vulnerabilities found by Cisco, MGM Resorts, and a partridge in a pear tree. And today I am joined by an illustrious cast. I'm not even going to try to go through the names of these people. And we're going to see if anybody can identify who I am for Halloween today.
Strand.
Well, it's no fun.
Incorrect. Try again.
You knew. So.
Tim Medine. He's Tim Medine.
Oh, Tim Medine. Yes. I'm doing my best Tim Medine today. So,
if you don't know who owns Black Hills, now you do.
Now you do. Tim Medine. Tim Medine is the full owner of Black Hills Information Security, and I forsake all rights, and the IRS can talk to him.
Oh.
this
like
year.
that.
All right, so let's jump right in. Do we want to talk about Okta? Because wow, $2 billion in market
What else
cap.
is there to talk
It
about?
is. Well,
Oh,
remember when we were talking about like starting a cybersecurity like trading fund where we like buy when they get breached and then just hold on to it until they
Yeah.
bounce
Oh yeah,
back?
the security
This is
fraud
the
episode.
time. This is the time to buy Oktas right now, and we'll see. Hopefully, it bounces back.
What's their ticker symbol? Is it BHIS? Wait, no, sorry.
No. They slumped. I don't know what Okta is. Here, let me go
It's
to
Okta.
CNBC.
It's okay. It's
It's
Okta.
literally
OKTA?
Okta. It's down half a point. I mean, it's
That's
it
because
doesn't-
all the
Well, from the 19th, they're down $20.
Well, to be
Yeah.
fair though, the entire market is also down $20. So like, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
Their high 52-week high was 91, and they're at 45 right now.
I feel we should mention we are not financial advisors and we don't know what we're doing, so
Yeah,
don't
not
do that.
Solicit us.
If anybody looks at me and they think this guy has got sound financial advice,
It's a
I mean,
bad
you
bet.
do look like someone I would buy gold from.
in an alley.
Yes.
If nothing else, gold earrings.
Yeah.
So basically, why is Okta down? I mean, we've talked about it in multiple different times in multiple different ways, but they're down because they seem to be the recurring nightmare of breach-related disclosures, whether it's them or their customers. It just keeps happening. So right now, it seems to be 1Password, which is a separate article.
Yes, and we'll talk
They
about that
said
one.
they announced on the 23rd that they detected suspicious activity in their internal Okta account. So as if that specific word, it does kind of seem like a get out of breach free card at this point. If you just say Okta, then it's like, okay,
Now,
you're cleared of all wrongdoing. Thank you.
Hey Corey, can you kind of walk through like what are these hacks? Because if I'm reading this correctly, it's not that Okta was hacked, right? It's not like somebody found a 0-day or a bug. That's not quite how these breaches are going down. So how are these breaches going down?
Well, so the threat that hit MGM, which is the first ever sort of wasn't the first Okta thing. I mean, I think where did it start? It started with Microsoft, right? Isn't that the first time?
I thought Okta was the first one to officially get breached, like way back in the day. Like they
Really?
they got breached, and then they just became a facilitator of breaches because people are misconfiguring Okta incorrectly
Okay.
or not.
Well,
But I
So,
think
okay.
they're separate
credentials.
things, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
separate
yeah,
And then
things.
there's the
So
breaches using Okta.
yeah, so what is like very topical right now, and I don't think this specifically relates to 1Password, but what is happening right now is attackers are calling, they're doing social engineering phone calls. This is what happened to MGM. They're calling in, they're saying, "Hi, I'm a high privilege account. I need to reset my password and my MFA factors. Just go in the Okta admin portal and do this, that, and the other." So that is why Okta has been in the news lately, because people are using it not necessarily outside of their intended functions, but just people are abusing it. There are some specific attacks that, like persistence or other mechanisms, they're using Okta functionalities for, but just because you have a button in your admin portal that says reset all MFA factors doesn't mean you're a security threat, right? Like that's fair. That's an intended feature. It's just being abused because Okta has made identity management quite easy, and that has made help desks enabled to do IT management that maybe they shouldn't be doing, to be able to strip off factors or other things.
What are some other big identity management companies though that like we
Ping.
haven't heard from, right? Why is it
But-
just
yeah.
Ping is a big one, but Okta just basically dwarfs everybody.
Yes, Okta
Is that-
dwarfs.
is
There's a lot.
Yeah.
I would say almost every big company at this point has an identity product. Okta just has the most variety. They also have, like, of the companies that are doing zero trust, they typically use Okta because it's really the only alternative that I've seen people use for I don't have AD, but I have Okta. So like that seems to be what people end up with actually is like instead of having AD, they have Okta. That isn't really what we're seeing with like the MGMs, but this new attack, I mean, we don't know. It's basically 1Password disclosed publicly and said, hey, there's some suspicious things happening with our Okta portal, basically saying we don't know what it is, but we're shutting it off. So
Yeah,
it
basically,
could,
I want to read their whole quote because this is it. On September 29th, we detected suspicious activity on our Okta instance that we use to manage our employee-facing apps. We immediately terminated the activity, investigated, and found no compromise of user data or other sensitive systems, either employee-facing or user-facing. That doesn't make me feel better.
So
No,
Okta
but-
suffered a breach of their customer service portal, right? And in that portal, there's tokens and passwords and all sorts of stuff. So it's assuming that right, had one of those tokens that got breached, and and someone got a hold of it.
Yes, that is the assumption. I don't think Okta has confirmed that. Have they?
Yeah,
that it was related.
I don't think
Okta
they
sort
will.
of talked about that. So a lot of it was like the HAR files. So like when you do a customer support, sometimes they want you to upload these HAR files, which are just a replay of a session.
Right.
And within those HAR files were a lot of Java web tokens, or JWTs,
Right.
And some other session cookies. And those got, those session cookies, attackers just, pulled them out of the HAR files and were using those to attack, which the other thing too is like Okta says, well, just going forward, sanitize your HAR files before you upload them. But
That's
Okta
not
provided
fair.
absolutely no guidelines on how to do that. They said, oh, it takes a few months for us to make a tool to do it. But Cloudflare stepped in and goes, okay, give us 3 days and we have a tool that will sanitize your HAR files before you upload them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, we also have an identity product.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that like the reason, obviously we know the stock market is just made up human emotion and it's not real. But I think the reason that Okta is getting blasted is because there's breaches like this, and their names just coming up too much for people to be comfortable with it. Whether it's you were breached, or you were breached using Okta, or Okta was breached.
They're just such a huge attack vector, right? They're such an easy win.
They are, but I think that we need to step back and look at this from somebody who's not technical, right? If somebody who's not technical, like a CEO that's looking to purchase from their CTO, is making recommendations, right? And the CEO is constantly seeing all of these attacks that are in the news. If I was a CEO and I knew nothing about the tech, I wouldn't feel comfortable working with Okta.
Hey, John, we should use Okta.
Yeah. Well, let's go for
that.
I actually think that we have a whole bunch of 30-day trial instances of Okta that we use in like spear phishing attacks, if I'm not mistaken.
No. Those are all breached.
Those are all breached, right? So
actually,
go ahead.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring OSINT up in this conversation. The fact that most organizations, when they set up their Okta instance, their company name is the subdomain name, makes it so easy to enumerate and compromise. I'm not going to say whether I was able to see somebody associated with Agile Bits or not, but it's possible. I have similar complaints with Proofpoint, but Proofpoint actually takes some steps to obfuscate it at least. I think that might be a step in the right direction. I mean, it's security through obscurity. If someone persistently wants to find out, they're going to find out. But this is just making it way too easy. If you run something like Sublister against Okta.com, you're going to find their entire client list.
I want to go back to something that's on the screen that they pulled up here, because the article at the top makes it like, oh, they dropped $2 billion. I want everyone here to think about $2 billion, right? That's a lot to you and I. But let's talk about market capitalization for a moment. Their shares plummeted 11%. That's nothing. The investors can ride that. And then if you look back even at this, look at where they were in 2022 and dropping down and then stabilized again. If we look in on this and you are an investor in here, you're just going to ride this. This is nothing.
Yeah,
what this is telling me is they can be breached 100 times and they're so embedded in corporations.
They're not.
Well, so it's, I mean, like, I kind of disagree, just because, like, I think John's perception of what the CEO's perception is where we're at. And, like, the needle will move slowly, but it will move. Like, this is what we saw with LastPass, where, like, at first people weren't aware of it. And now if I mention that, like, customers will ask me all the time, oh, what do you do for password management? I'm like, oh, I don't know, 1Password, LastPass, Psychotic, whatever. They're like, really, LastPass? And I'm like, actually, yeah, I guess not. Like even customers now are pushing back on that.
We are actually.
I think, Corey, the difference here is that, as you mentioned, there was 1Pass, there was Bitwarden, there were all these other password managers. Okta is the game.
Right.
For the
So
for
they
the
have
majority of everybody. So
alternatives.
you don't have the alternatives out there, or if you do, they might not fit into the organizations the way
momentum
that Okta
inertia,
does.
yeah. I mean,
They
also
have
compare it to Microsoft.
18,400 customers. 18,400.
Well,
Also-
compare that to
those are
Microsoft. That's
big.
Microsoft
you
has
can't
had-
compare anybody to Microsoft. Like it's like comparing
Well,
my
but it's replacing AD
childhood
for a lot of
grocery store to
companies.
Costco.
But I want to kind of like pick on that thread. This isn't something like these identity and access management solutions. Like they are not easy just to rip and replace. I mean,
No,
if
they're
you look
not.
at what we did, because we dumped LastPass for obvious reasons. I'm not going to say who we went with, but there was technical reasons. The electronic codebook mode and their AES encryption was really an odd choice and not a wise one. And then the fact that they had been breached multiple times, but also politically, we literally had customers that were like, hey, we don't want to do business with a company that is using LastPass. That came up in sales conversations. And that's a valid question, right? At that point. Do we think we're at that point with Okta? Because
No.
I don't think that we've seen any substantial structural mistake that Okta has made. It's just it is a vector that people are using to attack environments.
I
And
think
they're
that's
pretty on
right.
top of the ball with talking about their breaches, at least for
Correct.
the most part,
They have
right?
been.
And
They have
you got to remember, LastPass was not. Like
No.
that
No,
was the
that
thing
was
that
what
opened
hit
my
them.
eyes,
Yes,
right?
I agree.
And
That was bad.
so if you're at least talking to the community and like discussing it with them and telling them about these breaches and harboring that good trust, I think that's the key part here.
Yeah,
Yes,
but even
I
LastPass,
agree.
even if they were good at talking to people, like as soon as I started reading that report, I think it was in the first paragraph, it's like they were using electronic codebook mode. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, that's like crypto 101. I think it's in Bruce Schneier's book in the foreword. It says, do not use electronic codebook mode. It's just, I don't think that we've seen anything like that, like a technical huge mistake.
No,
that
we
Okta
haven't.
has
I
made.
mean, the support portal being breached that's big, and the HAR file
was
thing
big.
is that the HAR file thing is an example of they're just stretched too thin and don't have the ability to stay on top of everything. Like they're on the wave. They're starting to falter. Will the wave overtake them and crush them? I don't know, but for now they seem to be staying close to on top of it. And I do think one thing comparing them to Microsoft that Okta's always had is they've had the ability to investigate and respond and log, and that's something that Microsoft hasn't had, right? Like, at least with Okta, you can see when bad things are happening. Like you might not be able to do anything about it. It's too late, but you at least can go back and say, okay, when was this person, like 1Password looking through the activity logs? How are you going to do that with your E3 license? You can't.
So that kind of gets us on another thing that I think is important. Is the game of forensics changed? And I'm asking this because I kind of know the answer, but whenever we're looking at forensics, like going through Okta logs, trying to figure out if HAR files are being used, we had the certificate breach with Microsoft a little while ago. Like we're seeing a lot of breaches of these SaaS vendors or cloud vendors. And like your traditional concept of forensics is like out the window. If you're lucky, if you have anything that you can actually research,
Yes.
it kind of is starting to feel a little bit like if you're going to be a forensics investigator moving forward over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to have to know your cloud logs really, really, really well.
Well, John, you wouldn't mention what we switched to at Black Hills, but I'm gonna go above you and mention it because I think it's important. John shipped each of us one of these. It's unhackable.
Oh God!
I'm sorry.
I got it because it had a spin lock on the
I
back.
know. That's how you know it's secure. So yeah, this is you do your forensics on this and you're good to go. This is where you do Tim when he does Kerber roasting with this, he just puts it on a marshmallow stick and just kind of.
He's so good at it.
Fire. Have we roasted Okta enough?
I don't think we've roasted Okta. I think that's one of the things I want to state before we move on. I don't think that Okta, they could clearly do better, as always. But if anyone's listening to this and they're like, well, Okta is clearly a problem. If you're moving to another vendor, the exact same vector that nails Okta customers is more than likely going to work with that other vendor as well. So keep that in mind.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think Mike nailed it. Like, inertia and like identity, these are huge multi-million-dollar projects. They take months and months and months. The inertia is real, and also just comparing. We have Okta. Let's rip and replace it. Okay, even just finding a product that will meet the same demands is not going to be a quick thing. It's not going to be like you just export the CSV from LastPass and import it into this other tool. Done. Like it's not that. So, yeah.
I do, before we go to the next story, on a personal note, it is bringing me so much joy that anytime Corey speaks, just a full screen the frog, personally, it thrills me to no end.
That's because it's your people.
I sent you my podcast. Please respond. John's mildly nauseous look of amusement. Oh, that's
great.
gold right there.
So
That's why we do video.
Yeah.
That's why we do video.
Yeah.
All right, can we move on and talk about Boeing assessing the Lockbit hacking gang threat of sensitive data leak? Does anybody care? And Corey, I want to throw this specifically over to you. There's a lot of these data, like sensitive data. It's a lot of times the data is so voluminous that it's almost impossible to cut through. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of follow-on news stories at all where like, I went through all of Boeing's data and I found out that they're doing predatory pricing. I don't see anything like that happening. Does anyone really care at this phase with ransomware gangs threatening to release data? Have we ever seen that where it's been an actual impact on a company so far?
So I would say that for a company like Boeing, that the biggest impact, or companies in general, the impact is all going to come from regulatory pressure. Like if the data disclosed violates government things and leads to massive fines, they're going to care. If the data disclosed is like, oh crap, it was all the HAR files, well, arguably you should be able to, as long as you know it was disclosed, you should be able to respond to it and clean it, right, to make it invalid. I will say though, their whole like, oh, we need to assess the threat is very real. Is like, I believe that because even just figuring out like, oh, what databases were taken? Were they databases? Were they files? Where were they taken from? The files that were exfiltrated, were they encrypted? Were they classified? Were they like, this is a huge project. This happened to most of the victims of the cloud breaches is like, some of the stuff can be changed. A lot of it can't be changed. Design schematics for airplanes is just what I'm thinking of because I'm looking at a picture of an airplane. Those designs are not going to be able to be changed. Like if you use the flux capacitor in the engine compartment, you can't just go out and change that. Like it's just so it could potentially pose risks specifically for Boeing. But I will say these kinds of gangs make these kinds of threats all the time, and usually the data is crap. Usually what they have is like the Airbus breach. We talked about it on this. It was like their customer support or their like sales leads list. It was like 3,000 companies that they want to sell Airbuses to. It's like, okay, cool. But like anyone with any level of corporate awareness could tell you who might be in the market for an Airbus. There just aren't that many customers that are like, I will buy airplane.
And I think out of all the incidents that BHIS is working on right now, we have one where they pulled down some encrypted data, and it's been this game of chicken back and forth. Like, so you have all this data. Yeah, we do. Okay. Did you decrypt it? Radio silence. There's just, I think that's fairly common. Like, is it actual good data that we care about or not? And that's a rough game when you're working IR. I think the last two paragraphs, though, if we could scroll down to the last two paragraphs and zoom in on this article, kind of sum up a lot of this, right? That basically says Lockbit did not say how much data allegedly stole from Boeing or the amount of ransom demanded. Boeing didn't comment either. The hacking gang also did not immediately respond to requests for comment on an address it mentioned on the data leak site. It's just like, we don't know anything.
Yeah, it's totally, it's nothing. Like, yeah. I mean, also the other thing is, who would pay for this? Like, if you're Boeing, who would pay because, like, oh, hackers honor, we won't disclose the data. Like, if the kicker right there. If the data is disclosed from a corporate perspective, it's disclosed forever, and you can't, no backsies. Like, you can't un-ransomware something. So.
Flackfest has got a comment here, which I think really speaks to it. If the Boeing data was really valuable, they wouldn't be ransoming it. They'd be selling it to competitors or foreign governments. If they aren't already in bed with the foreign,
which they would do, right? Whether Boeing would pay the ransom or not, they would do it. Also, Lockbit, like they mentioned, is a what do they call it? Dual extortion. They typically like to lock things out. So if they were unable to lock things, they
pulled
like
this out of
meaning
their pocket.
they probably don't have that much data. If you didn't make us hurt from like an awareness and availability perspective, then you probably don't have that much data. But
well, the other question that I've got as far as Boeing paying any sort of ransom is their close ties with the U.S. government and how if they were to pay ransom, that would affect their contracts. We all know, we've all heard that the FBI says, don't pay the ransom, don't pay the ransom. Well, what happens if Boeing would pay the ransom? How would that affect them from that sort of standpoint?
I think it would make them look bad because even if they pay the ransom, they can't assume the data's safe. So
yeah. Well, I mean, for the because I had thoughts on like Boeing looking bad. It's somebody said like back a few years back when they had like the 787 Max, and I had to ground all those planes because there was some software error that was making them crash.
Yeah,
and it was just like, oh, is this going to be the end of Boeing? No. Like they're going to ride this out. Like Boeing's going to just go past.
To be fair, though, they haven't. Yeah, from an investment perspective, though, like even to this day, they're still kind of not where they once were. Like it has affected their company long term. But it's the reason it has is the same thing with other companies where it's like once people start to get that like smell of death, no one will touch it. It's like,
but
yeah.
One thing we have noticed though, that breaches usually don't matter.
No,
if we're going to learn anything from our podcast,
Correct.
breaches don't matter. Airplanes crashing, that probably matters. That definitely matters, and that shows.
Yeah.
Yes,
exactly.
What you're talking about, I mean, not to be too businessy, but you're talking about liability. When people forget, I used to have this conversation all the time with executives. People would forget that when you acquire a company, they're like, look at all this cool stuff we just bought. That's not true. You acquired the assets and you acquired the liabilities, which is why you see so many like, oh, we're going to spin this off. We're not going to buy that part of the company.
Yep, exactly.
So Boeing could very easily in that scenario say, well, we're just going to get out of commercial aircraft. They could do that.
Ian, well, I just got to say you were full screen there for a second.
Mm-hmm.
You now have to dress like this every single day.
Boss, I've never received an order from you.
Ian, I don't know where the tips end and you begin.
This is amazing. Like this outfit, the glasses, just chef's
I don't know if you saw the shirt though. Like,
no, I didn't.
Live fast, eat trash.
Nice.
So I mean, the last thing on the Boeing thing, if it actually did happen, it's a subcontractor, guaranteed. Oh, it has to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, even to that end, a bad breach can be minimized by good PR.
Yes.
And it's not even good, not like ethical PR, but effective PR.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Just any PR, actually. Right. Just don't ignore it. So
no, I mean, how many times have we talked about breaches that have happened? Hug ops to remember when Dragos had their breach and the write up that Rob Lee and the team did there
was amazing,
brilliant, and everyone went, yeah, okay.
Then everyone moved on.
And moved on. Yeah, that was that. Yeah.
So
cool.
All right. Let's move on. The next one I would like to talk about is a Wired article. AI generated child abuse nightmare is here. Working a lot of these cases.
Real uplifting article.
Yeah, this is but I think we have to talk about it because it's not just child abuse, right? I actually watched a video from an influencer in Los Angeles that was really, really worried about the influencer space and the market of influencers because AI could generate like these quote unquote fake AI generated influencers hawking products and on beaches and it was incredibly well done. Like you couldn't tell it wasn't a real human being. It wasn't a real beach. It wasn't a real place. And the thing that they ended with that was right now today is the worst that this technology is going to be. And with these images of like child abuse, there's a couple of things that I think are really, really interesting about it is we've known that this has been coming for a long time, right? Like as soon as, even before deepfakes, people were like predicting this type of thing that was happening. The other thing is it gets into some really weird legal gray areas. One of the cases I worked, the individual had a whole bunch of like quote unquote child pornography, but it was anime and pictures. And there was a long conversation about whether or not that was illegal or not. And that's going to be an interesting thing as we move forward, because identifying the victim is something that's very, very, very important. And if this is starting to bum you out, just look at the pictures.
yeah.
I brought a kitty so that you can
It'll
look
make
at that
it
as we
more
talk
kitty.
about this. So,
But-
okay, this is really depressing for so many reasons. Number
Yes.
one, that people want it, but also number two, that like because of the nature of how this works, I wonder how much of this would get picked up by like automatic CSAM filtering, like how that we have.
A lot of those filters, I think, would still catch it, unless
feel
you're
like they
talking
would.
about KFF known file functionality, because
Yeah, I don't know.
there's well, originally it was just straight images that the FBI was keeping a database of. They would take all of these images, and then you could do a search with any images that were pulled off a computer that could then cross-reference that to see if that was any known victims. And you didn't even have to do any of the work. A lot of that was done on hashing. And a lot of the newer technology that they have, they can actually recognize the victims. And it's not just like a specific image, but the person in the image. And then they're cross-referencing and they're searching that. But yeah, I think if you're reusing those victims again and again, then that will absolutely trip that with what the FBI has. But
I mean, it's also like it could just be so much that they could never detect every. I don't know. At least because it's going to change every time, right? If it's AI based, you could just keep generating and generating.
Yes, you could. Now,
Yeah, you're going to hit an infinite loop, but like based on my experience with reverse image search, for example, and granted, when I'm doing reverse image search, this is not what I'm reverse image searching. It's typically just a person, oftentimes for a demo. And like Yandex, for example, is really good at classifying the person.
Yeah.
So, for example, I'll feed it a person. It will identify it's a woman. It'll even get kind of close with the shape of the eyebrows, the type of glasses. Is she smiling? Is her head tilted? Is she in a car? So if they can apply those same types of algorithms to this CSAM material, they could be able to classify it as it's a minor being abused. But then you still have the problem of, is this a real person or is this AI generated?
Well, and Joe, that last point I think is the biggest one, because if you're working in law enforcement and you have someone that appears to be underage, but one of the things that was described to me, if there's any level of like puberty development and they don't know who the person is, they usually kind of drop those cases and move on. And I know that that's really super depressing. But whenever you're looking at it from law enforcement's perspective, I want everyone to understand that having conversations with law enforcement, they basically said that they could put everybody on this and they still would not be scratching the bottom of the barrel.
I mean, just
absolutely.
It's like it's just as simple as being the AI engineer who designed this would take the wind out of your sails so much. Like it would just be the most depressing thing to realize. I mean, you just got to put the guardrails up, right? Like make it so that you can't generate this kind of stuff wherever possible. If you are, generating it, then it should get dealt with. I mean, I guess from a criminal perspective, what are your thoughts? Like it's on one hand, it's a crime to possess it, I guess, probably, but I guess maybe not. Will it end up in court? I don't know.
Corvus brought up a great question, and I want to answer it the best I can with my limited experience in doing this, okay? Should it matter if we can identify who the victim is, and should it matter if we can identify
if it's AI generated, arguably there is no victim, right?
Arguably there is no victim, and we're not saying that like that's not how I feel. That's just a legal perspective.
Like legally, right? Yeah.
The other thing that you need to keep in mind is there are actors and actresses that they appear very, very, very young, and they're like 25, right? And my point in bringing that up is if you can identify the victim, and if there's any level of development, then it becomes very, very difficult for the FBI to say, we have a case that we can actually pursue and say that this is in fact child pornography. Because it's possible that it may not be child pornography. It could be somebody that's older that just appears young. I know that that's a distinction without a difference for many of you, and I get that. But please understand that whenever you're looking at pursuing cases, if you have the option of pursuing a case that is 100% deadlock win, and you're looking at a case that's going to take months or like possibly years to prosecute successfully, you're playing a game of resources. and you're going to be putting your resources towards the cases that have the highest probability of a conviction.
Well, and they're all probably going to be accompanied by other crimes than just CSAM. It's going to be trafficking, or it's going to be kidnapping, or something like that.
And I mean that from a legal perspective. If you're lucky, then that's just another thing in a big bucket of awful. But if these images are the only things that you have, you've got to make a decision on how you're going to prosecute.
Yeah, I want to jump
I think the other thing that people need to realize about legal is that while there's a moral stance, they have to go by what the devil in the details are.
Yes.
What does the law directly say? It doesn't matter whether they agree with it morally or immorally or ethically or what. It's what can they actually do inside of that exact framework. And it is a very detailed and very exact framework in a majority of instances.
And that framework, not just from the law's perspective, from the prosecution perspective, also has the concept of resources. You're going to go after the cases that you can prosecute successfully in the shortest amount of time.
So, and to that end, there's two things that I want to bring up. Sorry to talk over you on this one, Ian. But there's an organization, I'm not going to name the organization, that I work with. I will be honest, it's not Trace Labs, but I work with people in identifying this kind of material, and it's not Innocent Lives Foundation either. And basically our target audience for when we get called in on an op, we specifically try to ascertain the age, and the age range we typically look for would be 8 to 12, based on what John was saying with the whole any signs of entering puberty. But another thing that I want to touch on really quick that Shecky mentioned is the legal perspective. In the U.S., our legal system is very reactive in nature, and it's very precedent driven. So because we haven't, something like this hasn't made it to court, there's no precedent set. There's nothing on the books from our legislators that can drive this. So right now it's such a legal gray area. I mean, it's grayer than I am, and I've been gray my entire life.
Oh, wow.
Oh, boom. Okay, so I do want to
Go
add
ahead.
something to that. One of the things that you both brought up was the idea of going after the cases that you can win. And there's actually a darker side to that, which is we all want to say, hey, this is clearly wrong. Like, it's the definition that the Supreme Court gave of pornography, right? They're like, I don't know what it is, but I'll know it when I see it, right? That was said by a Supreme Court justice. With that said, one of the worst things that can come out of this is you go after something where you're trying to establish a precedent. That gets shut down, and now you've given a legal defense to people who should not have it. So that's one of the other reasons why these prosecutors go after that. They go after the things they know they can win, so they can have precedents to go after the next person, the next person, the next person. The second thing that I wanted to mention was around, is there no victim? Unfortunately, these large language models and generative models have to have a basis for something. And it's going to be terrifying to find out that many of these models in these private places where these things are traded are built off of actual exploitation material. And if that's the case, then all it is a continued trauma. But proving that, we've already found difficult in anywhere from art to anything else. And now we've got another excuse that these people can use to say, oh, well, that isn't it. The computer generated it, so it's art. There is no harm. There is no victim. And that is where I think the real danger lies.
And I completely 100% agree. And a lot of people in like the FBI and in law enforcement, they do not want to take a case that they could lose, and then they would have that horrible precedent moving forward.
Yep.
So, okay, here's what we've learned. If you're law enforcement or vigilante or whoever, the clear answer is to go after whoever's generating this crap. It's that. It's like whether it's law enforcement going, like FBI or whoever, the people that are writing models to create this, that's the people you go after, because like Ian said, where there's smoke, there's fire. If the model is trained on something, that probably means there's a crime being committed. So there you go, right? So I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting. Hopefully someone will take down these whatever, organizations or groups that are making this stuff. That's where you stomp it out at the source, because, I mean, it's tough though, because as we know, large language models are getting easier and easier to build and maintain over time. Yep. Like, That's great because it has positive ramifications for documentation and other, it's like any tool where it can be used for good, it can be used for evil.
I want to bring up last point from Blackfest because we could talk about this all day. What really scares me about this is the potential of extortion abuse for vulnerable individuals like young teenagers, taking social media pictures and throw some AI, threatening and extorting regardless of the legal stance of the damage that could already be done.
Right,
and
to deep fake someone underage. And
once again, I talked, this conversation came up at Wild West Hacking Fest probably 3 times. I would hate to be a kid today. Like, there is no way I would want to be a teenager with the bullshit that's out there today at all.
How long until we get social media that's just no pictures and no videos? It's just text only. Back to bulletin boards?
We're going back to IRC, baby.
No, Barry's got an idea. Okay, hold on. We build a website, right? And it's limited to text at 140 characters. Okay?
I like this.
And that's it.
That's it. Just 140 characters.
140 characters.
But what if people extra? Can they get 280?
No extra.
You can't edit your tweets.
Okay.
You can't edit your blanks.
Your burbs.
Your skies? Oh no. Okay. Oh. You're right.
Yeah.
Damn, you're right.
One thing I would say, I competed in an anti-trafficking CTF a couple of months ago, and to kind of put a nail in the coffin on this, because I'm perfectly fine changing the topic as well because this is some dark stuff. We were primarily looking for adults, but typically once you found one person, you're able to unravel the entire stable and then work to the person of interest. So in cases where they can actually identify a person, often they are in a stable and the charges are going to pile up really, really quick.
Really fast. If you can get that far into it.
Exactly. And what it boils down to is
Corey was talking about getting to that root. If you can get to that
root. Yeah. But then you also run into the problem that they plead out for lesser charges and they serve 2 to 3 years and they're back at it.
So what we need is someone that somehow makes a tool that unravels what the AI was trained on somehow. I mean, it would be useful for a lot more than this, but this would be an example of,
Every single movie studio would just throw money at you.
Did anybody read Tracers in the Dark?
No, I did not.
Only me? Wow.
Tracers in the Dark?
Yeah. Sorry, I can't read.
It's another Andy Greenberg book. But it goes through crypto, but the last chapter goes through child predatory cases and how they track them down. But this reminds me a lot of that and how the leading to tracking crypto winded up leading to tracking child predators, right? And usually child predators don't have the best cybersecurity out there. Some of them do, of course, but a lot of them don't. But I definitely think once you crack one case open, like you were saying with this, it's just going to flow. And you'll be able to keep tying it over and over together.
And to your point with the crypto, that's the whole big thing. Like, again, this is also not the organization that I work with or did the CTF with, but Anti-Trafficking Intelligence Initiative, that's exactly what they're doing. Their domain is follow money, fight slavery. And they're trying to find the connections between crypto and trafficking as it relates to onions. So you're spot.
I
lost him.
On that point too, Biden released some stuff today about AI executive orders and developing guidelines and stuff like that. But I doubt.
Well, we kind of made fun of the AI.
But it was good. Remember,
do you think he wrote it with ChatGPT? Did he write that with ChatGPT?
It was like, wow, this does not suck as much as this totally does not suck, as Triumph the Insult Dog would say. When referencing Bon Jovi. So let's move on. I want to close out probably the last one is the MGM hackers. Microsoft has basically said that they are one of the most dangerous financial criminal groups. And, Octo Tempest and everything that they're doing. And it's weird because if you read this and kind of break down why they think that they're so dangerous is they speak English really, really well. So their ruses and their social engineering tend to be more effective. I somewhat kind of agree, but also disagree. their means and like what they're using, sim cloning and social engineering, they're basically utilizing multiple prongs to try to successfully break into organizations is kind of my thought, but I wanted to get you all's thoughts as well.
It just seems like they're good. That to me, I don't know. Like they're all none of these playbooks are very like surprising to me at the end of the day. It's just that they're using all of them, right? And they made a couple big splashes so far, like SIM swapping, texting, credential purchases, help desk scams, social engineering. Like those are the bread and butter. It's just you found someone who actually actually writes in English and it's legible, and maybe the grammatical errors aren't that bad, and they fool a couple people.
So so if it's saying these are the most dangerous groups, who is this being compared to?
You said one of the most dangerous.
Right, but like who if they're looking to their left and their right, who is more dangerous or less dangerous? Like, are we talking about like comparing them to like North Korea? Like who
I don't know. I don't know how they kind of like look, let's be honest. Like I am pretty sure, what was it? Was it a year ago or was it 2 years ago? That I freaked out in the middle of the night and I had BHIS shut down text-based authentication. It might have been this group in one of their previous earliest attacks, but it was enough to scare the living hell out of me, right? When I found out it was an option, we had to go through and shut it off, and it was kind of disruptive. But seriously, like they've been very successful. Hats off to them, very, very solid, good offensive group. But then it gets back to the key question. It's like, why is it just because they speak English? Is that it? Or is it kind of they're better at doing these various techniques? I think everybody else uses the techniques, but I can go throw a football and I'm not Tom Brady, right?
I think it's also targeting though, because I think like North Korea, we know targeted primarily crypto related, basically exchanges and other companies that would have large amounts of crypto, which I guess from the FBI's perspective isn't as much of a risk to the American public as high profile institutions like MGM. Like how many Americans have stayed at an MGM resort? Probably like a decent chunk. I don't know. I mean,
I don't know. But you're talking about the Bitcoin and all that stuff. I mean, up until fairly recently, law enforcement looked at a lot of that stuff as like fake money. They didn't really care all that much if those crypto exchanges were knocked over and how.
I think on for me where it comes in, and again, I haven't been watching as many of the groups over as long of a period of time as some of you like John have, but it seems to me that they adjust and switch their tactics much faster than most of the other big name groups that I see out there. And that's what scares me the most, is that they're not just developing new tactics, they're making the adjustments faster. And you take a look at what it says, starting in 2002, they were using this. By now, we're a year and a half later, all of a sudden, they're into using Black Cat and other techniques on top of it all and making that adjustment that fast and being effective at it.
And Mike, that's one of the things that kind of, you know what? I think you're right. I think you got something there. This seems more like a professional pen testing firm. And the reason why I say that is a lot of the groups that are out there, they will use a handful of techniques and then they'll kind of, wash, rinse, repeat to see a group like this that basically can change their tactics and go after the vulnerabilities that are presented to them. That really seems like an actual pen testing firm at that point.
Right, it almost seems like they're not that big of a firm as well, right? Usually, like me thinking corporation wise and organization, when we start seeing those SOPs on how to do stuff, like which ransomware group had their SOP leaked, and it was just pretty much like Conti, right? Conti. Once I would imagine, is it true for ransomware groups? Once they get to a certain size, they just send out SOPs. But if they're small and agile and able to pivot quickly, do they act more like this, right?
Well, and that's one of the things, like, okay, if we were going to create a ransomware group, right, and we were going to try to be as evil as possible and get billions, there's no way in hell that I would hire hundreds of people to do it for me. You would want a very small, tight-knit group that knew what they were doing and had very solid techniques, and you would work from that.
I'm sorry, but we have to highlight Graham's comment. It's so
Which one?
Sloth Boy.
I missed it.
Yeah, I was going to pull one up. Here it is.
Microsoft should just acquire Alfie. That's what they do in every sector when it becomes a threat. Oh my god!
I mean, I love it. So okay, wait.
WWLD just dropped another one. Said they're just a startup looking for.
Okay, so John, yeah, I mean, should we subcontract through them? I mean, they're clearly pretty good at social engineering and other things. I mean,
I don't know. All joking aside, right? I mean, groups like this genuinely scare me at BHIS. Like, these are groups that have really solid techniques, and I want to know on the back end. This is something we talk about a lot in our continuous pen testing practice. Is one of the things that pen testing firms can't do that regular black hat hackers can do is fail a lot. Like, you see the success of how this group launched an MGM attack, or let's also talk about some of the Okta attacks that have dropped as well. Those are successful, but I'm willing to bet that there is a crap ton of failures that they had before they were actually successful. And that's why we kind of are switching into this continuous pen testing model, so that we can actually start doing year-long testing where we can try a bunch of crazy stuff and see what sticks. But I would love to know. Like, how many times do they fail if they go after like an MGM? Because I doubt very strongly.
Well, they just move on if it doesn't work.
First one,
right? Yeah.
Isn't this team supposed to be relatively young too? Like, they keep saying that they're. So I wonder if they're just like the older ransomware groups, right? The old grizzled vets who know try and true, get the job done, right? We're going to run this, we're going to run that. These are the kids who are actually like passionate about cybersecurity, who are about hacking. So they're like out there grabbing all the tools.
Cybersecurity.
Right? They're at the top of their game. They majored in new,
crime,
they're still fresh.
Majored in crime.
This is what I keep trying to interject with.
It's the University of Moscow's CCDC team.
Yeah. So this is what I keep trying to interject with, because I think Wade just about nailed it there with they're the young kids, right? But I'm gonna make it a little bit more historical. So while I was off last week, I picked up this book at the Mount Rushmore gift shop, and it's called Mr. Lincoln's High Tech War. And one of you had said they're quicker to adapt, and this is exactly what this book talks about. All his generals didn't know how to use the telegraph as a weapon of war. They didn't know how to use the railroad as a weapon of war. Balloons, ironclad stuff. These younger people, they have grown up. So think about the definition of like the Zennial, Millennial, Gen X, right? They have grown up seeing the interaction of all these technologies and are now able to synthesize them. It is not, look at this cool parlor trick I learned with phishing. It is now, look what I can do with SMS, with phishing, with this, with social, with these leaks.
You mean I could just buy access to companies online?
I don't know. I honestly though, there's like, they didn't just download Raid Shadow Legends and click hack in the game. Like, I think
that.
I think this is like, I get what you're saying, but my like vibe pulling this out of the dark is like their dads were all Okta admins.
it's simple. Like, it's real simple what they are.
Yes, the techniques are not Gen Z techniques. They're making phone calls. That's something Gen Z does not do. Gen Z does not call. If it's not a Domino's pizza tracker, they're not calling. Like,
no, but they know their targets. They know their targets, and they know the.
I'm gonna back up in on this though. Like, looking at the Okta style attacks and how they can actually utilize that access, I think that they got some really solid curiosity skills, which is a skill that we don't talk about. We talk about
how much do you want to bet that they're watching this podcast right now, learning some new techniques on it?
God damn it, Mike.
Maybe they read practical.
No, we don't allow hackers in. There's a gate. There's a gate.
No, only good hackers watch.
No, they have to get through that whole Okta thing to get logged.
They got to get through Okta to get here. I'm going to go with Ian on this. Like, whatever it is they're doing, whether their dads are Okta admins or not, like, it's impressive, right? It's absolutely impressive.
Dads and moms.
Dads and moms. That's right. Good point. Thank you very much, Corey. It's absolutely something to think about. But I think if this is what this generation is going to be doing for hacking, I'm just going to say it. MITRE's going to be very busy.
Well, yeah, we're screwed.
All of the different techniques and all the different attacks. It's like it's going to get out of hand.
I will say,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I fully agree that like when I read these groups' tactics, I feel FOMO and I feel jealousy and I feel like, and also I feel like I need to pivot my skills as a pen tester to adapt. Like
Yep.
we talk about this, John mentioned we talked about this with continuous testing, but like, what is emulating a threat actor? This is defining what it is, and it's evolving over time, and it's getting harder to do, right? So,
okay, so
like running a Nessus scan, probably not what they're going to do. They're not like, I don't know, it's just a whole different, it changes security.
I want to bring this up to kind of close it out, to give people an idea of what we're dealing with moving into the future, okay, and what curiosity is. And I was going to talk about this, and we talked about it yesterday, Corey. We're going to have a webcast on it, I hope, probably in the new year. But, let's go back to curiosity versus what is happening in the industry right now, right? So on one side, you have these attackers that are using social engineering, they're using smishing, they're using all these different techniques and a variety of creative combinations to gain access to companies. And then on the other side, we have a whole bunch of firms that are standing up and creating products they call automated pen testing products. And I know people have heard me get on this soapbox before, and I'm flaming pissed off about it because I know that some of these firms are talking directly to CISA, they're talking to NIST, they're talking to CIS, and they're trying to get it so an automated pen testing tool can qualify as a pen test. None of the crap that you're seeing these kids do is stuff that an automated pen testing tool will pull off.
No.
And to wit, we had a test where we were completely stuck, like getting smoked by this company. They had amazing security. They had fantastic security, as a matter of fact. And the testers were able to hack into the company. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details on it yet, but they literally had an AI that you could access and ask questions at this company. And they literally asked the AI, how do we gain access to this GitHub server? And the AI gave them a roadmap of what are the different things that you have to do in order to get it. And they were able to break into that and then get further escalation after that, simply by talking to AI and asking the right questions in the right order. My point goes back to that curiosity thing that Ian was talking about. Our adversaries are using a whole bunch of really novel techniques, and they're using them together in a variety of different ways. And when we're testing, a lot of our testers are being pushed to do the exact same thing. The idea that some automated tool is going to replicate a freaking pen test and emulate what these attackers are doing, no, we're not there yet. Not even close.
Well, it gets into the definition of what is a pen test, because because I think it's tough, because we talk about this all the time on the show. The drifting apart of security testing versus compliance testing versus actually emulating threat actors. At this point, I think we can basically say that's three different products. That's three different solutions. Mm-hmm. Like checking your patch management, great. Maybe that'll pass PCI compliance for you, and maybe HIPAA too, and maybe even NERC-CIP. But going deeper, okay, now we're talking about a pen test. Pen testing, though, going even deeper, then you're talking about continuous testing, or whatever you want to call it, attacker emulation. It's like, it's almost splitting, the industry. It's like a whole compliance thing and all that. Like, there's never going to be a compliance that says you have to pretend like you're a really good hacker. Like, it's never going to be required to do this level of testing. But for the companies that care, following the real threats is like, it's. I don't even know if I'd call it pen test. It is pen testing, but it's so different than what I consider a traditional pen test.
I think my scary part about a blue teamer watching all this, right, is knowing that these large organizations cannot pivot this quickly. We cannot implement any type of change. We can't even do testings. Like, it takes so many approvals and so many tests and so many check marks to just get one of these tests going sometimes. And it can get pretty crazy for the blue side. And you have to be agile and on the ball and have some gnarly, like, executive behind you in order to push your security team. And if you can get there to a company, that is freaking great.
Wade,
but I don't think
how many times do you hear stories from blue teamers that they try to get cloud logs and they get pushback because it's too many logs? We don't even know if they have those logs. The vendor says they don't have those logs. And the really good blue teamers are trying hard to do that. Then you get the logs, and it isn't an issue of just getting the damn logs. It's an issue of getting the logs and then having to reverse engineer which of those logs are going to be effective in an IR engagement.
And then storing them. How long can you store them? There's just so many factors, right?
Let's keep Wade up at night even more. In that Microsoft article, in the one that we were just talking about, one of the things they specifically mention is that attackers will cut the connections They will cut the logging. They will cut the emails.
Okay.
So this is something we've seen. We're trying to
Dude,
emulate.
We do that too. Like if we get admin access, NetSH ADV firewall, you can block the AV from sending any logs. Like that's, I mean.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things. Like as an attacker, as a fake attacker, emulating the real attackers, and then also defending against them is getting more complex. Of like, okay, well now as a pen tester, when I get in, the first thing I have to do is turn off all the alerts. Okay, how do I do that?
I'll tell you this. That's like one of the things that scares me so much, just because like some organizations, maybe the SecOps team is doing alerts and running the tools, right? That's going to be smaller organizations, but bigger organizations, it's going to be a whole nother team watching if hosts are going down. Right. Yeah. And if you write an alert for if a host's EDR goes down,
it's going to go off every time I go
it's going to go off all the time. There's no way you're going to catch that. You're going to have so many different avenues in order to hopefully catch something. But then it's the whole castle thing, right? Like hopefully you do something on AD and that pops it, or hopefully
you have a Gmail in your AV and EDR. Because if you don't, when you're like, seriously, I'm not even joking. Out of band, like, do you have you provisioned out of band access? I mean. Yeah,
there's still Nokia racks that you can put in that is an SMS text gateway in your data center, so that it literally just feeds to that.
I mean,
I want to hit two comments, guys. We got to wrap this up. 2 comments. One, Hex B, waiting for Microsoft E7, where you can buy your logs afterwards too. And then Sam was talking about most common way to actually get into pen testing and hacking and things like that. Go look up our 5-year plan. Just do a search for John Strand 5-year plan. It gives you kind of a roadmap on how to actually get to the point where you can do this stuff. But with that, Ian, can you bring out the crooked finger?
Oh, John, I would be happy to do that as soon
Thank
as
you
I get
so
back to that
much.
screen.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining this week. We will see you next week.